The slap echoed through the Brooklyn apartment like a gunshot. Mitchel Thompson's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning as her father crumpled to his knees before three men in expensive suits. Blood dripped from Marcus Thompson's split lip onto the worn carpet where Mitchell had learned to walk 25 years ago. "Please," Marcus gasped, his voice breaking. "Just give me 2 more weeks. I'll get you the money." The man in the center, tall and unervingly still, tilted his head. 2 weeks, he said softly, his English perfect but accent touched. "You said that 6 weeks ago, Marcus. The interest alone is now $200,000. Your total debt is $500,000. Mitchell's stomach dropped. $500,000. Her father's community center renovation. The loan he'd taken from what he'd thought was a legitimate investment firm. The firm that turned out to be a front for the Korean Mafia. "We don't have that kind of money," Mitchell said, stepping forward despite her shaking hands. "You know we don't. This is a non-profit community center in Brooklyn, not a drug empire." The cold man's gaze shifted to her. The weight of it made her skin prickle. "Jin-Woo," one of his men warned quietly. "We should go." Jin-Woo. So that was his name. Mitchell filed it away, meeting his stare even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You have spirit," Jin-Woo said, taking a step toward her. "Foolish spirit, but spirit nonetheless." He circled her slowly, like a shark assessing prey. "Your father gambled on a dream and lost. Someone has to pay the price." "Then take the building," Mitchell said. "Take everything. Just leave him alive." Jin-Woo stopped directly in front of her, so close she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. "The building is worth perhaps $100,000 in this market. That leaves $400,000 outstanding." His hand shot out, gripping her chin, forcing her to maintain eye contact. His fingers were cold. "But you might be worth something." Marcus struggled to his feet. "Don't you touch her. Take me instead. Kill me, but leave my daughter alone." "Killing you recovers nothing," Jin-Woo said, still holding Mitchell's face. "But her." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone almost thoughtfully. "Young, educated, beautiful. Yes, you might clear your father's debt after all." Mitchell's blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have 2 options, Mitchel Thompson." Jin-Woo released her chin, straightening his already perfect tie. "Option 1. I take everything your father owns, burn his community center to the ground, and make him watch before I put a bullet in his head. Option 2. You marry me, become my wife. Your father's debt disappears completely." The words didn't make sense. Marry him? This stranger? This criminal who just threatened to murder her father? "That's insane," she whispered. "That's business." Jin-Woo checked his watch. A Patek Philippe that probably cost more than her entire education. "You have 60 seconds to decide." 59. 58. "Mitchell, no." Marcus grabbed her arm. "I'm an old man. I've lived my life. Don't sacrifice yourself for me." But Mitchell was already doing the math. Her father had given up everything to raise her alone after her mother died. The community center was his life's work, feeding hundreds of kids who had nowhere else to go. And Jin-Woo's eyes told her he wasn't bluffing about the bullet. 30 seconds, Jin-Woo said, bored. "If I agree," Mitchell said, hating how her voice shook. "My father goes free? Completely free? No debt? No retaliation? Nothing? You have my word." "The word of a gangster?" Jin-Woo smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Mitchell had ever seen. No warmth reached his eyes. "The word of Jin-Woo Park is worth more than any contract in this city. When I make a promise, I keep it. The question is, do you have the courage to accept?" Mitchell looked at her father, tears streaming down his weathered face. She thought of all the kids at the center, the after-school programs, the meals, the safe space her father had built from nothing. She thought of her MBA almost finished, her plans for the future, her freedom. Then she thought of her father's blood on the carpet. 10 seconds, Jin-Woo said. "I'll do it," Mitchell said. "I'll marry you." Jin-Woo's expression didn't change. "Smart girl." He gestured to his men. "Draw up the papers." We'll have the ceremony tomorrow. He turned back to Mitchel, stepping so close she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Don't mistake this for romance, Mitchel. You're collateral, nothing more. A debt paid in flesh because your father was too stupid to read the fine print. And don't you mistake my agreement for surrender. Mitchel shot back, fury overriding fear. You can buy my signature, but you'll never own me. Something flickered in Jin-Woo's dead eyes. Amusement, interest. It vanished before she could identify it. We'll see, he said softly. We'll see. The courthouse wedding felt like a funeral. Mitchel wore a simple white dress she'd grabbed from her closet that morning. Her hands shaking so badly, she could barely hold the pen to sign the marriage certificate. Jin-Woo stood beside her in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his expression blank as marble. No guests, no flowers, just two witnesses from Jin-Woo's organization and a board clerk who'd clearly seen worse. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The justice of the peace droned. Jin-Woo didn't kiss her. He simply took the certificate, folded it precisely, and walked out. Mitchel followed because she had nowhere else to go. Her father had begged her not to go through with it that morning, but she'd already made her choice. At least he was alive. The SUV ride to Manhattan was silent. Mitchel stared out the tinted windows, watching Brooklyn fade into the rearview mirror. Everything she knew, everyone she loved, disappearing. Jin-Woo sat beside her, typing on his phone, acting like she didn't exist. The penthouse was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses, art on the walls that Mitchel recognized from her art history classes. A Rothko, an actual Rothko. She was living in a museum. Your room is there, Jin-Woo said, pointing down a hallway without looking at her. Stay out of my office, stay out of my business, and we'll coexist peacefully. Break those rules and you'll discover I can make your life considerably more unpleasant. We're married, Mitchel said, hating the slight tremor in her voice. Where's your room? Jin-Woo finally looked at her, and his smile was cruel. Did you think this was a real marriage? You're an obligation, Mitchel. A debt I paid because it was cheaper than the alternative. You'll sleep alone, eat alone, and live alone in this apartment. I have business to attend to. Then why marriage? Why not just make me a servant or a prisoner? Because a wife has legal protections that make certain aspects of my business easier. You're a prop, nothing more. He moved closer, and Mitchel forced herself not to step back. Let me make something very clear. I'll ruin you for other men, Mitchel Thompson. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be too broken, too damaged for anyone else to want. You'll be a ghost in a gilded cage, and that's all you'll ever be. Rage flooded through Mitchel, hot and sharp. You can own a contract, Jin-Woo Park, but you'll never own me. I don't care how many threats you make or how big your ego is. I'm not afraid of you. It was a lie. She was terrified, but she'd be damned if she'd let him see it. Jin-Woo studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the massive, empty penthouse that was now her prison. The first week was a psychological warfare Mitchel hadn't anticipated. Jin-Woo would disappear for days, leaving her completely alone in the penthouse with no explanation. The refrigerator stayed stocked by invisible hands. Her laptop appeared in her room, untouched, allowing her to continue her MBA coursework online. But there was no phone, no way to contact the outside world. The windows didn't open. The elevator required a code she didn't have. When Jin-Woo did come home, he was deliberately, meticulously cruel. Not physically. He never touched her. But his words were surgical strikes designed to cut deep. Still here? He'd say, walking past her like she was furniture. I keep forgetting I bought you. Or he'd bring associates home for business meetings, introducing her with poisonous courtesy. This is Mitchel, my wife. I acquired her in a recent transaction. She came with her father's failed community center. The men would laugh. Mitchel would stand there, face burning, refusing to cry. But she was learning. She watched how Jin-Woo moved through his world, the coded conversations, the careful power dynamics. She saw how people feared him, how his reputation preceded him into every room. Jin-Woo Park wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a legend, the youngest man to ever control the Korean underground in New York, known for his absolute ruthlessness and his brilliant strategic mind. She also noticed other things. The scars on his knuckles, the way he never slept more than 3 hours, the pills he took for what she suspected was chronic pain, the nightmares. The nightmares started 2 weeks into the marriage. Mitchel would lie awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, when she'd hear it, screaming, Korean words she didn't understand, raw and desperate, coming from Jin-Woo's room down the hall. The first time it happened, she tried to ignore it. The second time, she put a pillow over her head. The third time, something in his voice, something so utterly broken, made her feet move before her brain could stop them. She found him thrashing in his bed, sheets soaked with sweat, his face contorted in terror. This wasn't the cold, controlled man who'd bought her like property. This was someone drowning in demons. Jin-Woo, she said softly, approaching carefully. Wake up. You're dreaming. His eyes snapped open, unfocused and wild. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Then awareness crashed back, and with it, fury. He grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise, yanking her close. What are you doing in here? He snarled. You were screaming, Mitchel said, refusing to flinch. I thought something was wrong. Nothing is wrong. He released her wrist, shoving her away. Get out. I don't need your pity, and I sure as hell don't need you playing concerned wife. Mitchel rubbed her wrist, studying him. His hands were shaking, barely perceptible but shaking. Who were you dreaming about? None of your damn business. We're married. That makes it my business. Jin-Woo laughed, harsh and bitter. We're not married, Mitchel. We're strangers bound by a piece of paper. You don't get to care about me, and I sure as hell don't care about you. Now get out before I make you regret coming in here. But as Mitchel walked back to her room, she couldn't shake the image of his face during that nightmare. The raw terror, the pain, whatever demons haunted Jin-Woo Park, they were winning. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Mitchel had been working on a paper for her strategic management course when she noticed the camera in the corner of her room. Small, discreet, but definitely there. She found 2 more. One in the bathroom, one in the living room. She stormed into Jin-Woo's office without knocking, slamming the door behind her. He looked up from his desk, surrounded by ledgers and laptops, his expression darkening. I didn't give you permission to enter, he said coldly. You're watching me? Mitchel demanded. Cameras? Really? What kind of sick control freak are you? Jin-Woo leaned back in his chair, utterly unbothered. Security. I have enemies, Mitchel. Enemies who would love to use you against me. The cameras ensure your safety. My safety? Or your control? You've turned me into a prisoner in a golden cage, and now you're watching me like I'm some kind of lab rat. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Mitchel moved closer to his desk, her voice rising. You want to know what I think? I think you're a coward. A pathetic, scared little boy hiding behind money and power because you're terrified of being human. You push everyone away, you hurt people before they can hurt you, and you tell yourself it makes you strong. But it doesn't. It just makes you alone. Jin-Woo stood so fast his chair crashed backward. In 2 strides he was around the desk, getting in her face, his breath hot against her skin. You know nothing about me. Then tell me. Mitchel shouted back, not backing down even though her heart was racing. Tell me who you really are underneath all this ice and cruelty. Tell me why you wake up screaming. Tell me why you hate yourself so much that you have to make everyone around you miserable. You want to know? Jin-Woo's voice dropped to something dangerous. Fine. I was 12 when my parents were murdered by a rival gang. They made me watch. Made me hold my mother's hand while she bled out on our kitchen floor. The organization took me in, raised me, taught me that love is weakness, that caring about anyone makes you a target. Everyone I've ever cared about dies, Mitchel. Everyone. That's why I won't care about you. That's why I can't. The words hung between them, raw and bleeding. Mitchel saw him clearly for the first time. Not a monster. Just a man so damaged he'd built walls to survive. "That's not strength, Jin-Woo," she said quietly. "That's just sad." Something cracked in his expression. He turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. "Get out. Jin-Woo. I said get out." Mitchel left, but everything had changed. The wall between them had developed a crack, and neither of them could pretend it wasn't there. If you're enjoying this story of two broken people finding each other in the darkness, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more emotionally charged content. Drop a comment below telling me what you think about Jin-Woo and Mitchel's relationship. Now, let's see what happens when that crack becomes a chasm. The next evening, Jin-Woo came home with takeout. Thai food. He set it on the kitchen counter without a word, then walked away. Mitchel stared at the containers, recognizing her favorite dishes. Pad Thai, spring rolls, mango sticky rice. Things she'd mentioned once in passing weeks ago. He'd been listening. She found him on the balcony, smoking a cigarette, staring at the city lights. She'd never seen him smoke before. "Thank you," she said, standing beside him. "For dinner." Jin-Woo didn't respond, just took another drag. Mitchel waited, letting the silence settle between them. Different this time, less hostile. "I was drunk last night," Jin-Woo finally said. "I shouldn't have told you those things." "Were they true?" He exhaled smoke into the night air. "Every word." "Then I'm glad you told me." Mitchel leaned against the railing. "I lost my mother when I was 7. Cancer. I watched her waste away for 2 years. Watched my father break apart trying to save her. When she died, part of him died too. He poured everything left into that community center, into helping other people's kids because he couldn't save his own wife. I understand loss, Jin-Woo. Maybe not like yours, but I understand." Jin-Woo looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment his mask slipped. She saw exhaustion, loneliness, a desperate, aching need for connection he was too terrified to acknowledge. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "I bought you, threatened your father, made your life hell. Why don't you hate me?" "I did," Mitchel admitted. "I do sometimes. But I also see you, Jin-Woo, the real you underneath all the armor. And that person is worth knowing." He turned away, stubbing out his cigarette with more force than necessary. Don't try to save me, Mitchel. I'm not a redemption project. I'm not trying to save you. I'm just trying to understand you." "Well, don't." But his voice lacked conviction. They stood together in silence, the city sprawling beneath them, until Jin-Woo finally went inside. But he left the Thai food on the counter for her. It was progress. The kidnapping happened fast. Mitchel was reading in her room when the penthouse door exploded inward. For men, balaclavas, guns. Professional. She didn't even have time to scream before a cloth covered her mouth, chemical sweet, and everything went dark. She woke up in a warehouse, hands zip-tied behind her back, head pounding. A man sat across from her, older, Russian accent, expensive suit. Dmitry Volkov. She'd heard Jin-Woo mention the name once in a phone call. "Hello, Mrs. Park," Dmitry said pleasantly. "So nice of you to join us. I'm sure your husband will be very motivated to negotiate once he sees our photos." "He won't care," Mitchel said, her mouth dry. "I'm just a contract to him." Dmitry laughed. "Is that what you think? Jin-Woo Park doesn't make contracts with people he doesn't value. Sweetheart. You're his weakness, whether either of you admits it or not. And weaknesses get exploited." One of Dmitry's men took photos with his phone. Mitchel, bound and bloodied from where they'd shoved her against a wall. They sent them to Jin-Woo with a message. "Come alone or she dies." Jin-Woo arrived 30 minutes later with 20 armed men. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Mitchel threw herself behind a crate, heart hammering, as chaos exploded around her. She heard Jin-Woo's voice cutting through the noise, deadly calm, giving orders in Korean and English. When the shooting stopped, Mitchel peered around the crate. Bodies everywhere. Jin-Woo stood over Dmitry, gun pressed to the Russian's forehead. Dmitry was laughing even as blood poured from his gut. I was right, Dmitri gasped. You do care about her. Jin-Woo Park finally found something worth dying for. And you found something worth killing for, Jin-Woo said, and pulled the trigger. Then he was running to Mitchel, dropping to his knees, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. His hands were shaking, his usual control completely shattered. Are you hurt? His voice cracked. Mitchel, talk to me. Did they touch you? Did they? I'm okay, Mitchel said, stunned by the raw fear in his eyes. Jin-Woo, I'm okay. You came. Of course I came. He pulled her against his chest, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Of course I came. God, Mitchel, when I saw those photos, I thought... He couldn't finish the sentence. I thought you didn't care about me, she whispered into his shoulder. You said I was just collateral. Jin-Woo pulled back, cupping her face in his blood-stained hands. I lied. I've been lying since the day I met you. You terrify me, Mitchel Thompson. You make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again. When I saw you that first day, defending your father with nothing but courage and love, something in me recognized something in you. I told myself I could keep you at a distance, that I could use you without letting you matter. But you matter. God help me. You matter so much it's killing me. Mitchel's eyes filled with tears. You have a really terrible way of showing affection. He laughed, broken and raw. I know. I'm so sorry. For everything. For buying you. For treating you like property. For trying to break you when you're the strongest person I've ever met. I told you I'd ruin you for other men. The truth is, you've ruined me for anyone else. I can't imagine my life without you in it. You're an idiot, Mitchel said, but she was smiling through her tears. You could have just asked me on a date. Would you have said yes? Absolutely not. You were a terrible person. She paused. You still have a lot to make up for. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, Jin-Woo said. If you'll let me. Mitchel kissed him then, soft and gentle, tasting blood and smoke and redemption. You're going to have to earn it, Jin-Woo Park. Starting with therapy, and no more criminal empire, and treating my father with respect. Deal? He whispered against her lips. Anything. Everything. 3 months later, Mitchel stood in the community center her father had almost lost, watching Jin-Woo play basketball with a group of teenagers. He'd stepped back from the worst of his criminal activities, invested in legitimate businesses, and was funding the center's expansion. Therapy twice a week, couples counseling, real conversations, real trust being built brick by painful brick. It wasn't perfect. Jin-Woo still had nightmares. Mitchel still sometimes woke up angry about how they'd started. But they were trying, fighting for something real underneath the twisted beginning. Jin-Woo caught her watching and smiled, genuine warmth reaching his eyes for once. He jogged over, sweaty and happy in a way she'd never seen before. What are you thinking about? He asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. How you bought me like property and tried to break my spirit, Mitchel said dryly. Jin-Woo winced. Are you ever going to let that go? Absolutely not. You're going to be apologizing for that until we're 90. Fair enough. He kissed her forehead. Still think I ruined you? Mitchel looked up at him, at this complicated, damaged, beautiful man who'd learned to choose love over fear. No, I think you saved me, and I think I saved you right back. Best transaction I ever made, Jin-Woo said. Mitchel punched his arm. Still not funny, but she was smiling. They both were. Two broken people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something new in the light. It wasn't the love story Mitchel had imagined for herself, but it was real and hard won and entirely theirs. If the story moved you, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories. Comment below and let me know what you thought about Jin-Woo and Mitchel's journey from hatred to love. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most broken people make the most beautiful transformations when they find someone worth changing for.